Hey folks, Paul Abernathy here. Well, everybody's gearing up for the 2026 edition of the National Electrical Code. In fact, at this moment, we're actually starting the work on the 2029 edition. But there's a good chance that wherever you're at, you have not even adopted the 2026 yet. Or if they are, it's in the early stages of adoption or even amendment in some states. But it's still one of those things where electricians and inspectors are sometimes going to have the conflict of interpretation and understanding what has changed and when it's changed. How do I enforce it? And is there any compromise? So I put together a video series. We're going to be talking about various changes in the code. We'll even dabble into some of the conversations that inspectors may have with the electrician in order to try to put ourselves in that position to understand each side of the party and possibly help come to a successful resolution for both sides. But learning the National Electrical Code can be a difficult task for many people. So we're going to break down a couple changes that I think is going to help get this mission started and help people understand the National Electrical Code just a little bit more as we move forward in the 2026 NEC. So the first one that we're going to look at is new to the 2026 edition, although you never really could install damaged equipment, right? But we didn't have anything really specific that dealt with wiring methods and conductors. Now, I've worked in the industry where I get probably hundreds of questions a year that are asking me all things about wiring cable, raceways. Can you install this? Can you just use electrical tape to fix damage? All these type of things. And finally, under the 2026 edition of the National Electrical Code, we do have a little bit of clarity here. So it addresses wiring methods and conductors that have been damaged by conditions such as water damage, fire damage, overloading, corrosion, or similar events that can be observed during an inspection or even a post-inspection when you may be having additional work done at another time and it gets observed during that inspection. We don't want damaged product to, one, be installed, but we also don't want damaged product to stay inside of the dwelling or building itself. We just want to make sure that we keep an eye on that. So the 2026 edition gives us some guidance for that. Now, there are also some informational notes that were added to 300.4c that talks about the NEMA Evaluating Water Damage Guide as well as the NEMA's Fire Damaged Guide. Because again, depending on proximity to the various wiring methods and the conductors and cable assemblies, it really can have a detrimental effect on that wiring method or even those conductors. So it's important that you realize that these documents that were put out through NEMA are the collective voice of the manufacturers. And nobody knows their wiring methods, their conductors, their cables any better than the manufacturer. So they're always going to be a very critical resource for you to reach out to and make sure that if you have any questions, you reach out to them and get some advice. Okay, but here's the deal though. The days where it was damaged and you could just grab electrical tape or patch it, that's gone. Because at this point, what we're looking for is actual damage, whether it is from degrading due to heat, whether it's been submerged, maybe it's the cable has gotten moisture in both ends of the cable assembly and it was a dry location cable, that could be a problem. But it's also not written that it can't be something that the two parties, the inspector and the electrician, can't have a discussion on. For example, I always hear that when we got single insulated conductors like THHN, for example, which is also typically dual rated as THWN-2, that N stands for nylon. In a normal installation, if the nylon is damaged, that's okay, because in a normal installation, it's there to reduce the coefficient of friction, that means makes it pull easier in the wiring method, right, and to protect the insulation. So if it gets marred up, scuffed up, damaged a little bit, that doesn't mean that the insulation is damaged because nylon is not insulation. Now, there are this rare occasions where you're in an oil and gas environment. And if you're in that oil and gas environment, and you'll know when you're in it, then that nylon has to stay intact, not damaged. But the vast majority of the installations out there, it's not a known oil and gas environment. In fact, if you didn't know this, the wiring cable manufacturers actually have to take the nylon off of the conductor when we do the testing of that conductor anyway. But just so you know that if it's a known oil and gas situation, like maybe on an oil refinery or in maybe an installation where you've got some oil filled components that could rupture and there's a potential for raceways being filled with oil or something to that nature, then okay, the nylon has to stay intact. But the vast majority of everyday installations, nylon gets scuffed up, ripped up, damaged. That is not insulation. And that does not make the product a damaged product. Okay. Now, scuff marks on non-metallic sheath cable, rippling of some of the sheathing as you're pulling it through the bored holes, things like that are vastly different than products that are exposed to conditions like, again, heat degradation, submerged conditions, charring, overloading, corrosion. All those type of things are conditions of use that have to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. But remember, you can always reach out to the manufacturer. In fact, that's why you have informational notes in there, in order to be able to give you guidance to NEMA, who collectively represents over 400 manufacturers around the country. So that's important. So again, remembering that this is an effort to try to keep from damaged wiring methods, damaged conductors from being installed. So if I'm an inspector and I walk up on a project and it's a brand new install and I see everything all taped up, I'm probably going to have a problem with that. But now I have a place to go in 300.4 C for that application code. So the key takeaway here is actual damage triggers a replacement. The inspection question is whether the wiring method or the conductor is truly damaged, and that's going to be something that needs to be a case-by-case basis between you, electrical inspector, or you, the electrician. All right. So the next one we want to look at is the 10 amp branch circuit that's been introduced in the 2026 edition of the National Electrical Code. Now remember, this is for copper clad aluminum, and it is only 14 gauge copper clad aluminum that this is introduced for. Now it is very limited to lighting outlets, and it's also limited to exhaust fans that would be installed on bathroom applications and in laundry lighting applications. So again, very limited loading here. Now, my biggest concern here is that you know that this cannot be used for any general purpose branch circuit. And I don't want anybody accidentally making the mistake and using 14 copper clad aluminum on a general purpose branch circuit and thinking that that's okay. I'll just protect it with a sized down overcurrent protected device. That's not going to work. Okay, so it's important that if you're going to use 14 gauge copper clad aluminum, that you understand it's for lighting outlet applications and in dwelling units, exhaust fans that are going to be on bathroom or laundry type circuits, lighting circuits. That is it. So don't think that you can put that on a receptacle. So you're going to have to use a little bit of knowledge of this and be proactive on it, because it is hard to tell the difference if you're not used to it. And currently there is no color coding systems that's required in the National Electrical Code for this. You see the non-metallic sheath cable with the various colors sheathing, but that is not a requirement by any code anywhere. That is something that the manufacturers collectively do. So I just don't want to hope that nobody makes a mistake, because it puts the inspector in a position where they're looking at an installation, and the color coding system makes it easier because we can look when something's yellow, then we know it's 12 gauge. If it's white, we know it's 14. If we see it orange, we know it's 10. And now with the 10 threes, the 12 threes, and the 14 threes, and those colors that are introduced, the pinks, the purples, it can get a little more confusing now. And so unless something sticks out, I don't want anybody to make that massive mistake and use a 14 copper clad aluminum, accidentally put it on a receptacle circuit, and think that it can be corrected after it's already sheetrocked and everything. So, because that's going to be a problem. So you need to be aware of that. So you're going to see the introduction in 210.23a, 210.24, and 240.4d, specifically 14 gauge copper clad aluminum. Is perfectly fine in the National Electrical Code for the 2026 edition. Just remember, it is very limited loading. So we want to make sure that we're not going to overload that by any means. Okay, so the key takeaway, 10 amps is permitted for specific lighting related loads, not for ordinary general purpose branch circuits. So I hope nobody makes that mistake because that would be a hard one to come back from once it's already done. The next thing we're going to look at in this episode is for all of you out there that are doing load calculations. One of the significant things, since we were talking about lighting outlets and lighting loads, is that the International Energy Conservation Codes and a lot of the states are on board with this energy management and using luminaires that have lower outputs. And so what's happened is that the VA per square foot for the calculation for service and feeders has now been reduced from 3 VA per square foot down to 2 VA per square foot. So effectively, it is lowering it as much as 33% than what it was in earlier editions of the National Electrical Code. And again, that's directly related to modern lighting, and it's has less load demand on that. Now, I need you to remember something, that this is only for service and feeder load calculations. Okay? If you're doing a branch circuit calculation to determine specific things for branch circuits, the number of branch circuits and those requirements, it still uses 3 VA per square foot. Okay? That is a different thing. Here we're talking about load calculations when you're doing a feeder or service load calculation. Instead of using 3 VA per square foot, you can now use 2 VA per square foot for dwelling applications in 120.41. And if you haven't figured out by now, as you will in upcoming episodes that we're going to do, is that 220, which was dealing with the calculations in the 2023 and earlier cycles, is now under 120 in the 2026 edition of the National Electrical Code. A lot of changes, a lot of things to absorb for electrical inspectors and electricians. They're going to have to be a meeting of the minds and understand these. That's what we're here for. Remember, you can always send in your questions to us here at ECNM Magazine or directly to me as well. And we will answer your questions in podcasts and videos and upcoming articles, again, so that you stay informed of all the changes that are coming, all the things that are taking place, and the relationships between electricians and electrical inspectors. All of the things are going to be critically important for you to get good insight into. All right? Till next time, folks, stay safe, God bless, and thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next video.